faithfully delivering value and exploring great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today, we're diving into the book, The Diversity of Life. First off, let's share a story to get a feel for what the diversity of life is all about. There's an island called Krakatoa between Sumatra and Java. In 1883, a series of massive volcanic eruptions hit, with the biggest one worse than a 100 million ton TNT blast. The whole ecosystem got wiped out, not a single plant survived. After the volcano calmed down, with no human help, Krakatoa surprisingly started rebuilding itself. Spiders showed up first, carried by the wind, just 9 months later. They began spinning webs on that barren island. Even though they might have starved, they kicked off the whole ecosystem recovery. In just 100 years, by 1984, the island had over 600 types of invertebrates like snails and scorpions, plus countless plants and fungi. From the outside, the recovered Krakatoa looks pretty much like any other island now. This whole ecological comeback really shows the power of biodiversity, which ultimately sparks the diversity of life. So, how does biodiversity actually form? And what's its special meaning for us humans? Why do adorable animals like the giant panda end up on the brink of extinction? Well, all these questions are covered in The Diversity of Life. In this book, they get a full answer. The author, Edward O. Wilson, is a U.S. National Academy of Sciences member, mainly studying insects, zoology, and sociobiology. Beyond his research, Wilson's also great at science writing, like with On Human Nature. And The Ants both won Pulitzer Prizes. He's called the last naturalist. The Diversity of Life. This book is the groundbreaking work on biodiversity, seen as a follow-up to Darwin's Origin of Species, and the New York Public Library named it one of the 10 best science books of the century. She believes biodiversity is key to keeping nature intact, and even after big disasters, it bounces back fast. The Krakatoa story is the perfect proof of that. Over millions of years, life on Earth has faced 5 mass extinctions, but it keeps on going. Out of hardship, new life emerges, multiplies, mutates, and evolves into even more diverse species, creating a vibrant world. Next, we'll dive into the core of this book, how biodiversity comes about and why we should protect it. Before tackling these questions head on, Wilson first spends a lot of time on a simple one. What is a species? A species is the basic unit of biodiversity. But surprisingly to many, there's still no clear definition for species. Biologists are chasing after an all-natural mating system, treating the species definition as the holy grail of life. However, as research deepens, they find themselves moving further from that grail, leading to vague concepts like populations, subspecies, and even semi-species. Essentially, it's because species aren't natural units like cells or atoms, but a fluid, ever-changing process. For research convenience, we have to settle for a compromise, defining species based on free mating and successful reproduction. But this definition can cause issues. For instance, lions and tigers can mate and produce offspring called ligers. Yet, in both looks and behavior, lions and tigers are clearly two different animals. Take paramecium, a familiar critter in biology class. American textbooks classify it into 3 types, mainly using microscopic shape. But with deeper study of mating habits, paramecium could be split into up to 20 species. So even the most classic species definition faces basic troubles. In fact, this definition dilemma is a key feature of biodiversity itself. Species happen naturally. Organisms don't auto-sort by human rules, making biodiversity mechanisms super complex. The most fundamental path is evolution. Wilson himself is a giant in evolution theory, even called the modern Darwin. He highlights 2 evolution modes, vertical evolution and horizontal evolution. The critters we know best often go through vertical evolution. For example, humans had a classic vertical evolution. from Australopithecus to Homo habilis, then to Homo erectus, and finally, Homo sapiens emerged. Each reproduction is a step in vertical evolution. Although vertical evolution is common, it doesn't contribute much to biodiversity. When one species evolves into another, the original disappears, so species count doesn't actually increase. If there were only vertical evolution, nature would become incredibly monotonous. What really drives biodiversity is the second mode, horizontal evolution, like cats branching into ragdolls, Scottish folds, Persians, and many other breeds, right? Only through ongoing horizontal evolution do new breeds emerge and even species explosions happen. Wilson calls horizontal evolution speciation, the process where one species splits into two or more. As long as speciation continues, biodiversity keeps growing. So, horizontal evolution is the fundamental path to biodiversity. Then, how do we achieve horizontal evolution? The answer is reproductive isolation. The essence of horizontal evolution is forming distinct species. And to become distinct species, the top priority is reproductive isolation. Reproductive isolation means closely related groups can't mate naturally, or even if forced, can't produce fertile offspring. Think of reproductive isolation as a knife. If a species is like a rice cake, this knife cuts it into many pieces, creating multiple species. Similarly, thanks to reproductive isolation, new species can't easily merge back once formed. And of course, there's also the possibility that two pieces of new rice cake might merge unexpectedly, forming a completely new piece or hybrid species. So reproductive isolation has two sides. It can be confusing. It creates species, yet prevents new ones from forming. But long term, it remains biodiversity's main engine. Without reproductive isolation, biodiversity couldn't exist. All rice cakes would blend into one lump. In short, reproductive isolation allows distinct species to emerge and stabilize, each becoming part of biodiversity. Therefore, reproductive isolation not only creates biodiversity but also sustains it. There are many types of reproductive isolation, mainly categorized as intrinsic and extrinsic mechanisms. Intrinsic reproductive isolation means chromosomes from different species can't pair up, like how horses and donkeys can't produce fertile offspring. But extrinsic reproductive isolation mechanisms are quite complex. Here we'll cover 6 key types: geographic isolation, temporal isolation, behavioral isolation, mechanical isolation, polyploidy, and ecological isolation. Let's go through them one by one. Geographic isolation is the easiest to grasp. Simply put, two species can't interbreed because they mate in different places. For instance, some mate in trees while others mate in water, or they're separated by mountains or rivers. They can't even get close, so no gene exchange happens. A major example of geographic isolation is glacial barriers. Although the last ice age ended long ago, the reproductive isolation it caused still exists today and has hugely boosted biodiversity. Take the tyrant flycatcher, a small U.S. bird. There are two main species, one in the southwest adapted to savannas, and another in the southeast adapted to wooded swamps. They were originally the same species but became distinct due to long glacial separation. When the glaciers retreated and they reunited, reproductive isolation had already developed. Sometimes, even forced hybrids can't survive in either swamps or savannas. They just get eliminated. So, thanks to glacial barriers, one original flycatcher species became two through reproductive isolation. Geographic isolation is everywhere, especially powerful on isolated islands. When a bird accidentally reaches Hawaii, it can form hundreds of species across islands and valleys in no time. Though sharing origins, geographic isolation drives divergence until they become completely distinct species. Similarly, temporal isolation means related species have different mating seasons, preventing interbreeding. For example, some breed in spring, others in fall, or even within the same season, they mate at different times. For example, There are 69 species of wild silk nuts in North America, all entering mating season at the same time. But each species mates at different times, some at dawn, some at dusk, others at night, with no chance to interbreed, creating classic temporal isolation. Beyond timing mismatches, there's also language barriers, signal isolation. Animals use various courtship signals, most commonly auditory ones. If two species have different mating calls and can't understand each other, they naturally won't mate. Um, Frogs and toads have completely different calls, keeping them isolated. Then there are visual courtship signals too. Like when male peacocks fan their tails for females, that's classic visual signaling, especially prominent in insects like butterflies and spiders. Take jumping spiders. They're spiders that jump. And different species use distinct visual signals to differentiate themselves. One type has red brows, white face, and black teeth, while another has gray brows, red face, and white teeth, like different Beijing opera face paintings, easily recognizable. They also perform quirky dance moves during courtship, like signalers using semaphore flags, creating clear visual signals. Female jumping spiders evaluate these visual signals from males to decide whether to mate. Different signals mean different species. When, of course, they won't mate, it'd just be wasted effort. Signal isolation sometimes even works across animals and plants. Many tropical American plants rely on hummingbirds for pollination, especially heliconia, related to banana plants but with scorpion tail-shaped flowers, hence the name. They use flowers as bright visual signals to attract hummingbirds. Without isolation between hummingbirds and flowers, random pollination would occur easily. Hummingbirds would randomly spread pollen across different flowers, preventing reproductive isolation. Fortunately, heliconia solved this cleverly. Different heliconia species have flowers of varying lengths. When hummingbirds feed on nectar, pollen sticks to different body parts, some on the neck, some on wings. When they fly to another flower, they only pollinate flowers of matching length, preventing mix-ups and achieving reproductive isolation. Other animals use light signals for communication, also achieving effective reproductive isolation. Take fireflies. Each species has its own flashing pattern. Some blink fast, some slow, making identification clear in the dark. Though they can't see each other clearly, they don't confuse partners. There's an even more reliable method. That's mechanical isolation, mainly when genitalia don't match, preventing interbreeding, like a male Great Dane and female Chihuahua. Their size difference makes mating impossible. Even artificial insemination is pointless, since a Chihuahua couldn't birth Great Dane puppies. The fetuses would be too large to deliver. Though still the same species now, prolonged isolation would soon split them into two distinct species. Next is a reproductive isolation mechanism from high school biology, polyploidy. Before polypody, let's revisit chromosomes. Chromosomes inside cells carry genetic information. Somatic cells have paired chromosomes, half from each parent. Gametes get only half. Recombining chromosomes forms new individuals. To humans, normal somatic cells have 46 chromosomes. Sperm and eggs each have 23, combining into a 46 chromosome zygote. Now, about hybridization, donkeys and horses produce mules, but mules can't reproduce. Why? Because somatic chromosomes can't split evenly for gametes, but some plants solve this. Their hybrid offspring can reproduce, forming new species. How? The classic example is radish cabbage hybrids. Both have gametes with 9 chromosomes. Accidental pollination creates a radish cabbage hybrid called Raphanobrassica. Their somatic cells have 18 chromosomes, 9 from radish and 9 from cabbage. Normally, these 18 chromosomes can't split evenly, so hybrids can't reproduce. But plants easily undergo polyploidy, right? Chromosomes duplicate, doubling in number. With 36 chromosomes in somatic cells, they can produce proper gametes and healthy offspring, forming a new species. Thus, radishes and cabbages add a new member to the biodiversity family. The final reproductive isolation mechanism is ecological isolation. Different species occupy different niches, lacking interaction, which over time creates isolation. Take Madagascar's lemurs. Different species prefer different foods. Some eat only fruit, developing short digestive tracts that can't process leaf fibers. So they avoid leaves. Others have long digestive tracts and eat only leaves, not fruit. If they ate fruit, sugars would ferment too long in their long tracts, producing toxins and causing diarrhea. Thus, though in the same area, these lemurs eat different foods, creating niche isolation. Different diets eventually make them distinct species coexisting peacefully. Compared to polypody, ecological isolation is more common and faster. It often happens in the same region, no vast geographic barriers needed, yet still creates biodiversity. This is called sympatric speciation. Sympatric means same region. Wilson uses insects he knows best. If two insects share a common ancestor and similar traits, they might live on the same plant initially. By chance, one group moves to another plant, adapts, and becomes a new species. Even if the plants are close, the insects on them can no longer mate. Sympatric speciation happens rapidly. Sometimes it takes just a few generations. Take hawthorn maggot flies. They occasionally move to other fruit trees, like apple trees. Since they breed only when fruit ripens, and different fruits ripen at different times, so hawthorn maggot flies, once leaving the hawthorn tree, must change their breeding time to adapt to the apple tree environment. Otherwise, they struggle to get enough nutrients from the fruit. When they adapt to the apple tree, they essentially become a different kind of maggot fly. If they return to the hawthorn tree now, they'd starve to death instead. Now, most apple trees in North America host this maggot fly. Their ancestors flew from hawthorn trees over 100 years ago, and today the two types no longer mate with each other. So here we've completed the introduction to the 6 types of isolation mechanisms. No matter which reproductive isolation mechanism, they all produce the same result, constantly creating new species while ensuring relative stability of existing ones. Under the continuous action of these mechanisms, as long as the environment is suitable, new species will be generated endlessly, and then they remain stable over long periods. Precisely because of this, nature exhibits astonishing biodiversity, and no one can accurately say how many species there are on Earth. Currently, the total number of species known to humans is only a small fraction of the biosphere. And nevertheless, the number is enormous, totaling over 1.4 million species, including more than 750,000 insects, over 280,000 other animals, and similarly for higher plants. Additionally, there are countless protozoa, bacteria, fungi, algae, and so on. According to Wilson's estimate, including unknown species, the total number of species on Earth should be between 10 million and 100 million. In comparison, the number known to humans is pitifully small, even less than 1/10. But one thing is certain, Earth's biodiversity is currently at its historical peak, surpassing any previous era. So in this sense, we are in the best period of Earth's history. Then Wilson poses a new question. Since nature creates species so easily, and the number of biological kinds is so vast, why should we worry about species extinction? His answer is that new species often haven't been tested by time. Their quality is generally low, with poor survival abilities. Although new species have their own characteristics and form, from a genetic perspective, they're just knockoffs of old species, not having gone through intense periods of natural selection or fierce competition for survival. Even so, new species only contribute temporarily to biodiversity, far from filling the ecosystem with strong vitality. In the face of truly fierce survival competition, new species rarely manage to hold on. They're like newcomers who don't yet grasp the cruelty of survival competition. Once the environment shifts, it's hard for them to survive. Cake pandas is an example. They appeared as a new species long ago, yet even today, their situation remains precarious. And once pandas go extinct, they'll never be recreated. That's one reason they're worth cherishing. And another reason we should treasure biodiversity is that you can never imagine what kind of wealth it might provide. For instance, in the Andes Mountains, there's a beetle that secretes a substance to treat pancreatic cancer. And vincristine extracted from Madagascar periwinkle can treat leukemia and Hodgkin's disease. These are deadly diseases with no other effective treatments available to this day. Beyond being a source of medicine, biodiversity is also a treasure trove of food for humans. Agriculture and livestock farming are gifts from it. Once biodiversity vanishes, all these treasures will be lost forever. Moreover, the ecosystem is a web-like structure where one species is often linked to many others. The extinction of one species can lead to the extinction of many more. That would trigger a terrifying chain reaction, and no one can predict the long-term consequences. Without a doubt, biodiversity is the foundation for all life's survival, including humans. But worryingly, human activities are having a catastrophic impact on Earth's biodiversity. So, the author describes the wave of extinctions triggered by humans arriving on various continents. There are many famous examples, including New Zealand's moa and Mauritius is dodo-bird, plus giant tortoises, the imperial woodpecker, and many animals from Madagascar. And this destructive process is still ongoing today, conservatively estimated. Due to human deforestation, roughly 27,000 species disappear each year, averaging 74 per day and 3 per hour. This number sounds shocking, but in fact, it might still be conservative. It can be said that we're in a mass extinction era in geological history. In this sense, it's also the worst period in Earth's history. Wilson says, we must understand that we need to protect not just human health and freedom, but the entire world that sustains the human spirit. And it's the diversity of life that gives nature its profound meaning. Protecting nature means protecting ourselves and taking real responsibility for future generations. All right, that wraps up our exploration of the diversity of life for you. You'll find reading notes below the audio. See you tomorrow.